Have you spent years looking after children and now they're starting to leave home and you're starting to wonder who you are and want to reclaim your identity? My guest this week is Rachel Marie Martin, and she's here to talk to us about how we can reclaim who we are when our children start to leave home. Hi, Rachel. When it comes to losing identity as a mother, why do you think that
Mhm.
happens?
I don't think anyone ever intends to start that way and think that's what's going to happen, but we get so busy. We're spending all of our time investing in them, which is a beautiful thing. That's the schedule. We're working with them. And then there comes a day where the schedule might not be as intense. And we have that. I like to think of it as a little bit of a pause where we go, well, who am I now? What do I like to do? Because we've spent 20, 30 years investing in somebody else.
Sure. And
Mhm.
as you say, it's a beautiful thing to do. And I think when you become a mother, that's what you want to do. You want to throw yourself into everything. That's your role. And you're absolutely right. When you're thinking of having a baby, we all think we're going to do it differently, don't we? We look around at our friends and our relatives and so on, and think, well, I won't do that. And then
Mhm.
you have a baby, and suddenly you realise that, yeah, you're probably going to go and get the biscuit tin or sorry, the cookie jar.
Right.
On certain points, or put on the TV or what have you. You're talking from experience because you've got quite a few children, haven't you?
I do. I have seven of my own children from my first marriage, and then I was remarried about 4.5 years ago, and added in another four, and then a couple of our kids are now married. So we have a very, very large family. And I like to add that last year we adopted a rescue dog, which we weren't busy enough.
Throw that into the mix.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I think sometimes that my daughter stayed here before she emigrated to New Zealand, and she brought her dog with her as well as her
Uh-huh.
husband baby. And I'd never had a dog in the house before. I really miss the dog now they've gone. I miss the
Yeah,
baby and my daughter, but the dog,
the dog, yeah. Well, it's unconditional love. They need you all the time, but there is this definite unconditional. They just love you. They want to be around you, even if you've had the greatest day or the worst day. So I get it.
Do you think that having a dog and, as they say, becoming a dog mum or a dog dad, does it help to fill that hole when children start to leave home?
Well, what's interesting about that is for my husband, I definitely see that he loved to play with the kids when they were young, like run around and do all that, and he loves to do that with the dog. So we've all decided, like, well, now you have a new play person. But I do think it helps. It keeps you busy too. I mean, there's always an activity with having one, and they like a schedule. So
Mm.
you are definitely committed to a level of being busy and then activity. There's not a day that goes by where our dog isn't like, hey, reminding us that he needs to go on a walk.
So you're back into a caring role straight away.
Yes.
I know not
Yes.
all of your children have left home, so you haven't got a completely empty nest, but you've definitely got an emptying nest. Are you noticing that from a emotional point of view?
It's interesting. My oldest is 28, and I can remember when she left for college and or university. But I just remember feeling like, wow, that went so fast. And then now it's as they're leaving, there's a part of me that's really, really excited for them because it's this unearthing of who they're going to be. So I have another son that just graduated this year and is going to college. And I am thrilled for him, partially too, because I feel like I don't want to cling too tightly anymore. And I think that's part of what it is to have them leave the nest is, you hold on to their hand when they're very little. And I think all of motherhood is kind of releasing that grip. But the kids, they always know that it's there. One of my other daughters will call sometimes just to check in, and other times just to ask me, is this chicken okay? Like weird mothering things yet, which I always answer when in doubt, throw it out. I'm just going to let you know. But
Good advice.
but yeah, it's good. I'm like, if you're thinking to call me, maybe you shouldn't eat it. But I love having adult kids because there's a level of relationship that we can have that I didn't expect when they were young. I didn't even have it in my my bank of knowledge in some ways that there could be a relationship or a friendship. And now that I'm in that spot, it's exciting for me.
Yeah, there's a transitional phase, isn't there, when they get to sort of mid-teens. And
Mhm.
I found that I've got four, and it's quite tricky to navigate, I think, sometimes. But I, with three of them actually, I went away with them and had a road trip or something like that. And we got to know each other on a different level, on that adult to adult level. And that really helped me to separate as the mother that's going to be hovering, and
Right,
to
right.
accept them as adults and know them as adults, because that's, really quite exciting. We have this thing over here, I don't know if with the cost of living and the housing crisis and so on, this boomerang kids
Mhm.
generation where they keep coming back. I've actually got my youngest son here at the moment, although he's off again next month. But that's been quite a challenge as well, because you just get used to them being away, and you look at your husband and say, well, hang on, who are you?
Right, right.
You just get to know. And then somebody comes back again. I definitely lost my identity when I was sort of at home with small children. They're so demanding, and as you say, we want to do that for them. What do you do when you turn around and, as I just said, they go and you think, okay, it's really quiet, and what now?
I think the what now question is the question that actually scares a lot of us. We think, oh, how could I have this question? Wasn't that the question my teen had when they were going to go into college, and when they were wondering what to do? What now? And we think we should have had it all figured out, or we should know. And I love the what now question because it's the question of possibility. It's kind of that freeing question of, okay, well, I don't know what now, but I get to figure it out. And so instead of fearing it, which I think can be there, like I have no idea, it's being okay with being a little bit uncomfortable in that question, and being okay with, maybe I don't know, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And not knowing gives me an opportunity to figure it out. And that's the way I started to approach that what now question. What's the next thing, whether it's the kids leaving home or you're dealing with a life story that you didn't really expect, and now all of a sudden you're on chapter 2 or phase 2 of it. And it's that moment where you go, okay, I'm going to figure out what's next for the next phase of life. And I might love this, I might not, but I'm going to invest the time.
My mother's generation, the idea was that you created a family, that was your goal. And then
Mhm.
when the children left home, you'd achieved everything that you were going to achieve. And there wasn't that next bit. I think that now we're gifted with so much more life, and it's in the middle of life. So we have different questions that we need to navigate. Yeah.
Yeah, I also believe that the 50s, late 40s and beyond, there is this little level of invisibility that I've experienced. All of a sudden, I don't quite know the pocket, or I didn't quite know where I fit into everything. I wasn't the mom of young kids, and I wasn't into this new phase, so that pocket was there. And then if you look at media or anything, it felt like, where am I? Where are my people that can relate to what I'm experiencing? And that invisibility, that feeling, but I believe creates that, well, what do I do now? But it also is invigorating because, well, you know what? I'm just going to do what I want to do for the first time in my life. I'm free from all those other expectations. I'm just going to step into it.
Actually, this is an opportunity opening up.
Mhm.
It's not the end of things, because you feel a certain amount of grief if you lost a job, you would feel a certain amount of grief. Losing your role as a full-time mum or a mother of young children also is a form of grief, but it's a transition, and it transitions into something quite wonderful, because for the first time, often ever, we actually get ourselves back and are able to do what we want to do. But what if you don't know what you want to do? What then?
It takes being okay with not knowing. A lot of times for me or others, I've discovered that we get busy. If we don't know, we kind of bury ourselves into either not doing anything or ignoring it. And if you don't know, I believe each of us has that kind of spark, that calling within us of what it is. It takes us investing into it. And in some ways, as a mom, I would tell my kids, it's okay if you don't know, just try. And I would tell them that over and over, like, just give it a chance. And I really, really believe that's what we're supposed to do as women when we get to that spot, is to give ourselves the same grace we would give our friends, or we would give our children in trying something new. You won't figure it out if you don't attempt. And you could think about it and think about it, but you have to actually start putting yourself into situations or investing the time and thinking about it and acting. It's that moment when you move from I'm just thinking about it to I'm going to try something. And in the trying, you might discover what you love. It might not be what you ever expected, but if you didn't take the steps prior to it, you wouldn't get to that place where you have something that brings you a lot of joy.
I find that so many people are so afraid of failing, whatever
Mhm.
that means. um,
Right.
it's really like we kind of grew up. We didn't have computers and things like that, and then the generation that came after me, probably your generation, actually, you try things on a computer. You press buttons. It's not the end of the world. It's like a digital camera. I could take as many
Mhm.
photos as I want, but I might only use two of them. Whereas on film, you only have one
Mhm.
chance. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of people have that same attitude about trying new things. And what am I going to do now? Well, I've decided I'm going to do this. I absolutely hate it, but I have to stick at it because that's what I decided to do. And it's all fluid, isn't it? That's the fun of it.
Mhm.
Is you can actually say, well, I've tried that. I've learned loads from it, but I'm going to take what I learned and I'm going to go over there and try that. And it's exciting.
It is exciting. It is, but it takes, like you were saying, that level of being willing to be excited by it. And one of my favorite quotes is, "It's fall 7 times, stand up 8." And I love that saying, because the presupposition, it's not fall once and then figure it out. It's the presupposition is there's a lot of times that you're going to fall, or a lot of times where it's not going to look right. And it doesn't end on fall, it ends on stand. And I really believe every single time we, okay, well, that didn't work, or okay, I tried that, we stand up, we discover more about ourselves, and we gain that kind of inner grit and, I don't know, confidence in self. And I really believe that's, for me, the biggest difference from me the 30 years ago, is this level of confidence in my own decisions that I didn't really have then. It would be like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think I should do that? And now I'm like, you know what? I can still get advice, but I'm probably going to go my own path.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of women, when they start going through perimenopause, one of the big symptoms of
Mhm.
estrogen levels dropping is to feel that anxiety and loss of confidence.
Mhm.
So the first step has to be to sort of build confidence with small steps. In the same way, if you were a mother, you taught your children how to be confident and how to go out into the world and try things and become resilient. You need to, as you say, give grace to yourself to be able to do that. I just want to circle back to what you were saying about that level of invisibility
Mhm.
that we all feel. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I believe it's mixed. Part of it's from our own selves, our own beliefs, because all of a sudden we don't, and this is maybe a social paradigm, but we don't look like what we used to. We're just changing. There's no way that I can get to be 80 without getting to have wrinkles on my face and all of that. But we live in a hyper filtered, a world of standards and stuff. And now there's that spot where I was saying we don't really fit. And then I also believe it's because one role is often, if you're a mother, it's ending. And then where do we step into next? Because I too believe that for most of history, women, that was the kind of the path, is you get married, you have children, you then you're a grandmother, and then you move on. There wasn't this gap space. And now all of a sudden women are presented this very large quantity, if we're lucky, of years that
Mm.
all of a sudden we have to fill. But there's not a lot of role models. There's not a lot of to look at to say, okay, that's how they did it. Which is why I believe that those memes and those quotes that come out that say, oh, this person became successful at 70 and this person became successful at 45, and all of that are so inspiring to us because we're all like, okay, there's still time, we can still do something. But for most of history, this kind of space in our timeline of our life, there, we just, what was it? You know, I mean, you can look back 400 years and I would have lived a long life. So, yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it was turn of the century, the last century, we were living to about 50. And,
Right.
you know, that, yeah, I've outlived that by over a dozen years now, you know, it's like, wow, it's pretty good. I was reading Pat Barker, a novelist. She's written a book called The Silence of the Girls. And it's a retelling of the story of the fall of Troy from the point of view of the women. And it
I'm
was,
gonna have to read that.
I'd recommend it. I couldn't put it down. I mean, it's horrific and horrible, but it was so interesting because we're brought up on all these tales of daring do of, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it now, Odysseus. Yeah, I did it.
Yes, well done, well done.
Odysseus and Achilles and Agamemnon and so on. There's all these wonderful heroes and so on, and then to see a story, a history retold in that way. You know, people hark back to the past and the past being this wonderful place. It wasn't for women.
No, no.
I don't think there's a time in history that's been better for women than now. And
Yeah, I would agree.
yeah, I mean, we have our battles and we have our things sliding back and that we have to deal with and so on. But I think that you say about invisibility, I think we have the media screaming at us. And if ever I speak in public and they say, can we have some music for you to come on to? I always choose Frank Turner, Photosynthesis, because there's a line in it that says, and I won't sit down and I won't shut up. And most of all, I will not grow up.
Oh, I love that. That's so good.
That's my battle cry. Don't tell me to sit down and be quiet, because that is how middle-aged women and older women have been expected to behave, you know, to be quiet and go out of sight.
Right. I love that. I would say that Tom Petty's I Won't Back Down would be the one that I would choose because of that same thing. I'm a runner and I think through that sometimes. Like, I am just not going to, I'm not going to go quietly. I just want to live fully. And to your point about women in history, there's many times where I will remind women, whether I'm speaking on stage or it's on my platform, that for most of history, women would have loved to have the voice and the ability to use the internet to express themselves. And I use it as a cry for, so let's not get stuck in the bickering and the back and forth. Let's actually celebrate that we are given this opportunity to express ourselves in some ways, to honor the thousands of years of women that had to fight to get to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what I love about podcasting as well. I get to talk to so many marvelous people, and particularly marvelous women, and
Right.
you know, across nations, and we can talk together, we can support each other. There's never been a time in history where we can reach out to each other the way we do now. And I think it's fantastic. I used to have a hobby pre-COVID.
Right.
And I need to start doing it again. I would come mainly in the States because I can speak English, but I would visit my Facebook friends.
I love that. My husband does that. Yeah.
Yes, because so many people, you know you're going to love them and that you're going to be comfortable with them. And some of my best friends are women that I've been in Facebook groups with and got to know, or I've interviewed on the podcast or what have you. And it's enriched my life to such a degree. So I'd really urge any midlife woman to really sort of get into all of that kind of reaching out that we can do in the internet, because there's so much dark stuff to do with the internet and so on. And a lot of older women are frightened of that. But there's also so much positivity and light. And we need
there is. And I always, the friendship is powerful. And where there's light, there can't be darkness. And I think back to my husband and I, pre-COVID, spoke in New Zealand twice. And we both times would stay with friends of the host that we were with. So we would travel all around. And some of my favorite and dearest relationships are with these families that I didn't know them prior to them opening their home to me. And I just love that I had that opportunity to sit at the table, to learn, to talk. And if I had just remained in like, okay, I'm just going to move from place to place and stay in a hotel and not do that, I would have missed out on the opportunity. Every Christmas, every year, we send cards all over the world to people that we've either stayed with or met or created and cultivated those friendships with.
The thing with invisibility, it doesn't matter how much outside influence there is. So media and culture and society, if you feel invisible to yourself, that's the most important piece of that. Because if you allow yourself to shrink back and become invisible and not have a voice, this is a rallying call to everyone to speak up. A lot of women that I speak to, when they go through the perimenopause years, feel so much rage. Where that comes from, it can be different for every woman, but we need to harness that, because goodness knows the world needs our voices now more than it ever did. So if you want to make a difference in the world, you need to be visible to yourself and work on your own confidence and your own sense of who you are, so that you can go out into the world and give voice to what you need to give voice to.
I absolutely love the visible to self. That was beautiful. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, because I've chosen a word for the year for the last decade. And this last year, the word that I chose was confidence. And I made a choice with confidence meant that I was going to put myself into situations that I previously would probably say, no, I'm not going to do that. Or no, I wanted to stretch the bit of uncomfortable, because I knew that every single time I would stretch uncomfortable, the part that was uncomfortable would become comfortable, and I would gradually develop that confidence. But it meant me doing things that normally I wouldn't do. And at the beginning of the year here, my husband and his kids would like to do this polar plunge, they call it, where they would jump into a really cold water. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And I grew up in a very cold place, but I was like, I'm not doing that. And that this year, I remember driving to the lake, and it's not even that cold, because I live in Nashville, Tennessee. So I mean, it's cold, but not like that. And the whole drive, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do it because I don't want to be cold. And I thought, I am stronger than cold. And so I ended up doing it. And I go underwater and I stand up and I'm freezing and I fall back in again because I was so cold. But I was only cold for about 5 minutes. And the confidence that gave me was huge. I thought, oh my goodness, you would have missed out on this exhilarating thing because you just wanted to stay warm. So it was really an eye opener.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing as well, that people would look at you and see a successful, very together woman, and maybe not think that they could do whatever they want to do to the level that you're doing what you do. And what people don't realize is that it's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone that enables you to do those things. It's not that you don't feel the fear. That famous book from years ago, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Right.
I will have times where I really can't do that. I just have to pull the duvet over my head. Just because you push forward and you start to move forward doesn't mean that suddenly you're Superwoman.
Right.
You don't feel the same feelings that everybody
Right.
else is feeling. I think it's important for people to realize that they're not successful because they're Superwoman. They're successful because they're prepared to be uncomfortable and to keep going, to persist and believe in themselves. What has given you your push, your incentive to move forward?
It's the realization that if I don't, there's bitterness on the other side. I knew there was a day probably about over a decade ago where I was kind of skirting the line of playing it safe. And I realized that you can't be really full of joy and try to be true. You can't just be in the middle. And I realized on the opposite side of joy was bitterness. And I had known too many people that were bitter at the end of their life. And I didn't want to leave that legacy for my kids. So it created this drive in me to like, I might as well go down swinging. I might as well try, because I didn't want to get to the point in life where I thought my biggest regret was, why didn't I try to do that when I had the opportunity to do that? So you're exactly right. That doesn't mean that every single day I'm out there running at my best pace. There are many days, because again, I'm a runner, that I'll come back and I will say, that was the worst run ever, but I still did it. I still accomplished it. And sometimes it might even be, okay, I'm just going to run to the stop sign and back today. And it goes to be reminded that everybody that we see have that moment of super success, all of that, we're missing the 18 years or the 5 years of small choices made every single day. Like, I'm going to just try, I'm going to lace up my shoes, I'm going to go out. And it's that we see the after and often miss all of that before of that drive that it takes.
That old thing, isn't it, of the overnight sensation that's taken 20 years to get there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and we're so good at comparing ourselves, aren't we? And sometimes we're comparing our start with somebody else's experience, and it's just chalk and cheese. You can't compare yourself to somebody who's been going at it all that time. So it's
right,
one step at a time, work out what you want to do, or try different things until that's how you work out what you're going to do, as you said earlier, and then keep moving forward. I'd like to know about your book that's coming out.
All right. Well, I have a book. It's coming out August 27th, and it's Get Your Spark Back. And it's about how to find happiness and reignite your life. And it was based off my own journey of, well, how do I get my spark back? I had gone through a really hard divorce about over a decade ago, and then rebuilt my life and started a business, but my kids were leaving. And all of a sudden I had that moment where I was like, well, I don't know, who am I now? What's the next phase? And so it's many of my readers would ask me, well, how do I get my spark back? Because they saw me kind of emerge again. And it answers those questions. It's how do I get it back? And it deals with like time and guilt, and really reframing your relationship with money. And it's kind of that friend sitting in the corner, cheering the other person on, saying, you know what, you can do this. Because I believe that even if you think, well, I don't even know if I have a spark, as long as we're breathing, there's a spark waiting for you.
Sometimes you just need somebody to blow on it for you a little bit.
Exactly. And it's such a I love that metaphor that we all have with it too. Like, the question I always would get from women wasn't, how do I get a spark? They always said, how do I get my spark back? And the idea with back was so powerful to me, because it meant they knew I had it at some point and I want it back.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And it's fabulous as well, like you say, holding out your hand to other women and cheering other women on. It's why I started the midlife movement. I'd gone through a horrible perimenopause myself, and I just wanted to say, come this way, you're going to be fine. I promise.
Right.
Okay. And it goes back to that whole friendship thing, doesn't it? And banding together and lifting each other up. So if we lift each other up, it's like, lifts up all the little boats if we lift up the sea. That is a terrible mixed metaphor, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what a rising tide lifts all boats, I believe.
That's the one.
Yes. And I love that metaphor. My husband loves that metaphor. So perfect. I knew exactly what you were saying.
You have a blog, don't you, as well?
I do. It's Finding Joy is my blog. It's findingjoy.net. Or if you're in the world of Facebook, it's Finding Joy blog on Facebook.
Right. Brilliant. I'll put it all there in the show notes. Thank you. You've been listening to the Midlife and Beyond podcast with Jo Blackwell, where we're changing the narrative on aging one story at a time.